15 years ago this week, in an article for The Guardian, journalist Ben Hammersley suggested a name for something happening in online radio, a broadcast that people could listen to on Apple iPods. He called it podcasting. Since that term was coined, there are now more than 630,000 podcasts covering everything from penmanship to puppy rearing. And almost every week, somebody you've heard of has launched a new one. In the dark ages of podcasting, it was not certain that the informal, sometimes homegrown experiments would endure. That's when I joined the fray with two Slate Magazine colleagues, Emily Bazelon and David Plotz, for a political podcast based on the conversations about the news that we had during our walks to lunch. About 14 years later, none of us write for Slate anymore, but the Political Gabfest continues each week, including occasional live shows, which is where we all recently talked backstage about why this format survived. Plotz and Emily Bazelon, who I have done the Slate Political Gabfest for 14 years.
I think it's 13.
No.
We think it's bar mitzvah.
I successfully introduced the show, and that's all I have to do for today.
After many takes.
Podcasts had basically just been invented.
Right, and nobody was listening, so it didn't matter what we did.
Returning again to the question of Barack Obama's tour, he went to Iraq, Afghanistan.
When did we
Israel,
realize
Jordan,
this was a thing?
Germany.
We did our live show right after Obama's inauguration.
2009.
Remember how surprised we were?
Yeah.
We were like, oh my God, people are here.
We're a little nervous because normally the show takes place in a space, well, 1/50th the size of this.
To me, the moment that really started the show was, it must have been the 2008 campaign when the Edwards story, Edwards was having an affair.
For me, it always comes down to the hubris of these men.
And we had a big fight.
And we had a huge screaming fight.
Emily.
I don't care. I deserve to know about it. I'm a voter.
F-bombs everywhere.
What the f- else do you think he was doing in the hallway?
I don't know.
And it was after the official show had ended,
Right, but
then we'd run the
aired it.
tape and then we aired it.
At the live shows, we always amp it up a little bit.
Tonight we tackle the philosophical questions that you actually think about. Who would give up their arm for the internet?
I think we're all fairly performative and we feed off of it.
Who would not give up your arm for the internet? That is...
People are attached to their body parts, and that is a healthy instinct to have.
But do you know what this would sound like after that was done? A lot of times at the cocktail parties beforehand, a son will introduce me to a mother, or so I don't know what that's about.
I think it's a way that people generate conversations within their family. It gives them a starting place, and then they have the dinner table or dinner party conversation they are having in their heads when they're listening.
Right. Are you accusing us of bringing people together?
Yes.
I went to Washington in 1995.
People don't necessarily have a safe or comfortable way to talk about politics sometimes, and they need, like, for those who've grown up with us or spent time with us, I'm not going to use the word safe space, but a safe space to listen and learn a little bit about politics and then take that out to their family.
Most of my clashes are with Emily, and I know I'm going to lose.
Sometimes people ask me whether we arranged beforehand, like we were arguing about the legacy of George H.W. Bush.
I do think there's been some instinct to just kind of whitewash his record, especially because we're trying to draw a contrast with Trump. And I just don't appreciate it.
To me, what I love about our disagreements is that they always come from a place of honesty.
I'm going to give you the last word, Emily. I'm giving you the last word.
Before you give her the last word, I would like at my funeral for people to say 30% of what they said at George Bush's.
Even when we heatedly disagree, we do it basically with a certain level of respect and engagement and listening to each other, and that's actually something people really appreciate. It's never just to win the fight.
So I have to say, I'm a frequent Gabfest listener. I listened to your most recent one yesterday, your Valentine's episode, and I was telling you this morning that I'm surprised, given you're always in different locations, how you don't talk over each other.
Yeah,
and you said
that's just that's the quality of editing. Yeah. Because there's usually a lot of very heated debate, and so people don't often take turns. But I'm glad it sounded good.
No, it does. It always sounds good, and I love that you bring in so many people for your live shows as well.
Yeah. That was
big
a
hit,
real
John
surprise.
Dickerson.
Yeah.
I didn't know you'd been doing it for so long. That's what I think is so interesting. I think I even learned the term podcast maybe 5 years ago, maybe. So I think you have a hit on your hands,
Yeah,
John
and
Dickerson.
it gave birth to the other. It gave birth to the Whistle Stop podcast,
Yes.
which came out of the cocktail chatter we
knew
do at
about
the
that
end.
one.
So podcasts beget podcasts.
So what's the next big thing, John?
The weekend is
Rest.
just trying to get.
Yeah, just trying to get to the
Well, it's a
weekend.
great podcast. I'm glad we
Nicely
showcased
done.
it. Nicely done.